growing up, I had two amazing parents. Mom, super present, engaged, like there 24/7, primary residence, primary parent. My dad struggled with alcoholism. For a long time, I held that against him. Now as I matured, I realized that, it's addiction is a disease. I believe that like cancer, it affects people in a way that controls and really, dictates the direction of their life. And so I had a dad who really struggled. But through that, I had this oscillation of, well, I really want to do this, but I don't know if I can. And so my confidence was down. And I really questioned if I had the tools and resources within me to do what my gut and my brain was telling me I could possibly do. So I'm here living in Toronto.
But you grew up in Toronto.
I grew up in Montreal.
That's right.
Montreal. Yeah. Go Habs, go.
Yeah.
For any of those Hab fans, you know who you are. And so I started coaching minor hockey because I loved the game. I played the game for a long time and I just wanted to be a young voice. But what I realized early on was that the one thing I was bringing to the table is I was going to be a stand for the players the way that my dad hadn't been for me. And so if that meant a 5:00 a.m. practice, if that meant, 9 at night, if that meant going away on a weekend for a tournament and not doing what I, want to do with my friends as a 20-something-year-old, then I was signed up. I'm all in. And so during that journey, I started to recognize opportunities in the business spectrum and I saw gaps. And I thought, maybe training hockey players. I was bodybuilding at the time. I loved being in the gym. And I thought, let me try this. But then here's the dilemma. Nobody was doing it. And so I remember thinking at the time, either this is a crazy idea and it's going to crash and burn, or no one's doing it yet, or they're just not doing it my way.
Right.
And so I went with the latter and figured I would, crank up the heat and put myself in the hot seat and see what happened. And in a very short period of time, players love doing the dryland training. They love the work. I outgrew the space that I was in and then moved to the facility we're at now in Northern Etobicoke and just started helping hockey players trust in their own selves, get a little stronger, a little faster, a little more powerful. They'd come back. Oh my God, I feel so good on the ice. It's like, oh, I guess what I thought about doing is actually working. So I literally just continued to scale. And here we are, whatever it is, 26 years later.
I was going to say, when did it start? Like 26
years?
1998.
Wow. Yeah. And I will say this, that my dad passed about 10 years ago. And when he passed, I had really gotten to a point that I had forgiven him and I'd recognized that, the things that I used to resent him for were not, were some of those things were outside of his control. But I remember when I wanted to start my business, I called my dad excited. I'd made this decision. I'm literally on the metaphorical diving board. I'm about to jump into the stratosphere of, I don't know, but I think I want to go there. And 12 times in that conversation, he told me to get a real job.
Come on.
And I share that story a lot now. And I share it from stages when I speak to entrepreneurs because my dad wasn't supposed to be my cheerleader in that moment. His job in that moment was to keep me safe. I mean, I'm a dad now. I have two amazing daughters. I want them to be safe. I want them in bubble wrap all the time. I know through a healthy perspective that that's not right for them, that scraping their knees and going through difficult times is a part of the journey. My dad didn't have those tools. So he was literally trying to keep me in the bubble wrap and telling me not to do it because he had never taken that jump. He had never even gone to the edge of the diving board. He didn't even know that the diving board existed. And so I remember in that time thinking, wow, I really am alone. Again, mom was supportive and I have a great brother, but none of them had been the entrepreneurs. So I was literally on a diving board all alone with no parachute, no soft landing pad. And I just went forward and here we are.
It's funny you say that too. It's like my dad was the opposite. We've talked about before where I remember I got a job in Toronto Hydro and he's like, what the fuck are you doing? He goes, I didn't raise you to do this. Like you have an entrepreneurial spirit. I was like, you're crazy. You sent me to do my MBA and all this other stuff too. What'd you think was going to happen? So it was funny, the opposite, right? But the one thing that hit home was like, well, technically when I failed, I got let go from a job I didn't care about. I was watching. Hallelujah. Yeah. It was the best thing in the world for me. And I always encourage people there, if you get let go from a job, it's a blessing. that means God's opening a door for you. There's other paths for you to do. Like there's something better for you on the other side. So it's like, great. It was a good experience. Learn from it and move on. Not everybody can do that. But I always remembered what Jim Carrey, did you ever see him do that? Where he got his PhD and honorary PhD. He talks about how his dad, and I always resonated that with me. So in case you know that, if you've Googled this, Jim Carrey talks about a congregational speech, and what he's talking about, he's like, my dad was always scared. He was scared for me to do this and stuff too. He goes, but he had a job as an accountant, which he hated, but it was a safe job. And he goes, after 25 years, he got let go, and then he had no foundation to do anything else. He failed at something he didn't even love to do.
Right.
He goes, at least, and now you're doing something you love to do, and I'm doing something I love to do, and you could flourish. So I think the mentality, like a lot of us, even as parents, like I sometimes too want to put the bubble wrap in my kids, but I think my wife and I are both entrepreneurs. We're like, I don't know what my kids want to do. And people look at me crazy. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I don't even know if I want my daughters to go to university. I'm like, well, you have 2 degrees. So why don't your kids want to go to university? I'm like, are my degrees helping me now? Somewhat, yeah. But if they want to do something else of which they're passionate about, again, if they're making paper airplanes for a living, that's a different that's a different story. But I love that, the fact that you actually had that position too, where they're too saying you shouldn't do this and you did it anyway and you're flourishing.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know a moment in time, on my continuum as a young boy to 1998, where I gained that entrepreneurial spirit. I do remember as a young kid, I started a baseball league, and it wasn't because I wasn't included in a league. It was just, we had a group of friends and we used to kind of play pickup ball. And then there were a group of other friends, and it was sort of like this sort of pickup ball, but a little bit organized. And I just ran with it, and we built 4 teams, and we had an all-star game, and we would go door to door asking for people to donate. This is back when your bottle of pop you could take to the store and you get 5 cents back.
Yeah, I remember that.
So we came up with these ways to fundraise, and we bought equipment. And like I said, the all-star game, I built a schedule. And so when I think back to some of those times, as a 13 or 14-year-old, building a baseball league that didn't really need to be built, but I just wanted something more formal. Right. I wanted us to have uniforms and names and so it was just something. So I think I've always had that little spark in me. To do,
I love it.
Yeah. To do things outside of the realm or outside of the typical box.
You're very highly motivated, right? And I love your, we talked about before, when you're doing your walks and you have these motivational things and the things you're saying to people, I'm like, I always resonate well with you in that. What was the onset for you to start, obviously with your childhood you're brought up with 2 different types of parents. Where does the motivation come from? Were you always motivated behind that too? Or is it something because of the hockey that got you motivated and that you're able to pass on your motivation to other people?
Yeah, that's a great question. This opens up, I think, a big dialogue. So I didn't know it, but number one, led by God. So I know now that the challenges I went through as a young boy without a dad being present, a dad that was struggling, me trying to fit into the alcoholic family, which anybody that knows, anybody that's going through the alcoholic family, everybody's affected. Everybody's sick. My mom was so upset about 3-4 years ago. I posted on social about, what it was like growing up in an alcoholic family. And she was upset because from her context, she thought I was saying that she was an alcoholic too. And what I've learned is the alcoholic affects everything. It's like throwing a big ass stone into a calm pool of water. The ripple effects, they go to the edge of the pool. And so I happened to be at the edge of the pool as we all were as family members. So the challenges I went through, the lack of confidence, questioning myself, afraid to step out, really step out of my comfort zone as a kid, trying to find a way to fit in, sometimes being mean to other kids because at least I got to laugh. And if I was laughing at you and we were laughing at you, then you weren't laughing at me. That, all of that crazy insecure dynamic, that's what I grew up through. And so when I came old enough to start grab myself by the scruff of the neck, when I was 27, I made a decision that I was going to make this shift.